everyone, and welcome to the Knighted Ones podcast, episode number 20. We are the only podcast that features a former national champion, a former radio host, and several podcasters shooting the breeze talking UCF sports. And as you can see, I'm wearing my national champions polo, right? And I'm popping my collar because the playoff is being played, the championship game, that is, while we're recording this. So we may know, you may get our reactions as to who's winning towards the end or who won. But right now, Washington isn't doing so hot. That is a lot of football, but we're talking basketball. This week, we'll be previewing the Big 12 conference with our very own Ben Stout. Chance McSpadden was supposed to be on the show this week. Unfortunately, something came up where he couldn't record with us, but we'll have him back on, for a later episode. Big 12 basketball kicked off with a dud. It was not fun to watch. I mean, it was great. I'm excited that we're in the Big 12, but it was not a fun game to watch. So we'll talk a little bit about that. And we're going to be talking about going back to football. We'll be talking about the portal. UCF has been really, really active this week and upgraded our roster. So excited about that. And lastly, we're going to be talking a little bit about the future of the playoffs, since this is kind of a playoff themed episode, and what it means for UCF. So excited about that. Excited to have the team back together again. And without further ado, let's go ahead and bring on Nobra, the producer. Nobra is finally back, which means I don't have to produce, and you guys will actually get quality content. So, Nobra, welcome back this week.
Hey now.
Hey now. There we go. He's getting better, guys. We had to give him a 2-week vacation and for him to figure out his intro, which is actually biting off of somebody else's. But
yeah.
Hey now. Who does it better? Who does it better? Do yours, Nobra.
Hey now.
Hey now. I don't know. We'll ask the guys as they come on. Trey Neal, we're bringing him on to the show. He'll be watching and reporting on the playoff during the show for us. So you'll get our live reactions and we won't miss out on all of the action. So Trey Neal, welcome back to the show.
What's up? How you guys doing?
We're doing great. Missing my Citronaut juice this week, so I'll be drinking water because I'm on the clock. But excited to be here. All right. Next up to the stage, let's bring back Alan Levin. Alan.
Hey guys, how's it going?
It's going great, man. Super excited to have you back and the full squad. And the tallest member of our team, Ben Stout, by a wide margin. And if you saw Ben next to Alan, it would be an even wider margin. But it's a pleasure to have you back this week to talk some hoops.
Yeah, man. Glad to be back. Thanks for having me.
All right. And last but not least, but always last, Josh Lazar.
Scores, man. Got the tattoo. Come on. We just doing Howard Stern quotes this entire show? What's happening? I can run.
Oh boy. All right. Well, this could really go sideways if we start going Howard Stern, shout outs and show quotes. So although he seemed to have backed down and come down to earth a little bit more recently. All right. So all of that said, I'm glad to have the full crew back and we're excited to have you. Let's get into some text talks. I guess, I don't know. Do we want to talk about the game first, or do we want to wait on the text talk and do the game later and do the Big 12 conference preview first? What do you guys think?
I mean, the text talks, mine are all about the basketball game. So,
yeah, may as well jump into it, but I'm fine with whatever order you guys like.
All right, let's actually do the conference preview. Obviously, we won't be previewing the Kansas State game, but we already saw that sad drama unfold. But Ben Stout, why don't you take us through a spin of the Big 12 conference? And as you can see, Chance was supposed to be on, but Nobra missed that completely. If you could take us a spin through the Big 12 conference, what you're excited about, being a former player, What games are you excited about? How does UCF stack up? Just preview the conference for us, and we'll jump in as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've been saying it, leading up to this past Saturday night's game, but just certainly going into our first home game in the Big 12. But it's the best conference in basketball, or it's by a wide margin. It's been rated the highest, highest ranked or highest rated conference. I think it's something like, for the last 5 years, it's been the best conference in college basketball. I mean, Roger and others, you guys have called it the SEC of college basketball. While the SEC is actually, unfortunately for a lot of us, they're pretty good at basketball as well. But by the same token, just top to bottom, it's a gauntlet that UCF has never seen before. I mean, which at kind of positively and negatively. I guess you could look at it either way. Glass half full, glass half empty. I mean, the glass half full approach is that we have an opportunity to beat a quad 1, quad 2 team almost every night in the conference, and so that's something that's the type of basketball that we've never played consistently, night in and night out in our conference, or really in any basketball season for that matter. And it's something that is the difference between these higher level conferences and even a conference like the American, which had 2-3 top teams every year. Obviously, Houston being kind of the flagship basketball program, or the one that we're always kind of judging ourselves against when we were in the American. And that actually hasn't changed much. And now that we're in the Big 12, but then you add, where we just came from a conference in the American where you can get, you were hoping to maybe get 3 teams that were NCAA tournament teams. Whereas in the Big 12, in around that 500 mark in conference, or even get a little bit a couple games over 500 in conference, like you could be a tournament team. Like, that's how good this conference is, and that's because of those opportunities that I talked about. I mean, the net divides up, and I don't want to go into what the net ranking is, but as far as the way the net rankings work is, it basically ranks every team in the country, and it divides those teams up into 4 quadrants. And it's a really big deal for building your tournament resume if you can get a number of quad 1 or quad 2 wins. And outside of like West Virginia and right now maybe Oklahoma State, almost every conference team that we're going to play is going to be in those top 2 quadrants, which is just a huge opportunity for us. It's really difficult. It shows how difficult this conference is. And so, but also I would hope that the team and in particular the coaching staff is really preaching to the players that the opportunity is in front of you every night to build your resume towards March, and you just never know what's going to happen, and you can't lay down and just accept that you were chosen by people outside of the building to finish last in conference. You got to go out there and try to take it. And just to provide further context to that, as far as the net rankings go, there is, I think I counted it as 2, 4, 6, 7 teams in the top 25 in the net rankings in our conference, including number 1 and number 4 in Houston and BYU respectively. And as far as the top 40 teams in the net, which is, again, we're even top 60 teams, you're still approaching like tournament worthy teams as far as those rankings go. We've got 10 teams in the top 60. So it's just a gauntlet when it comes to this conference. If you're asking me to look at our schedule and say where I think the biggest opportunities for victories lie, I still think we're hovering around, if you ask me to predict it today, I'm not the best at predicting lately. If you looked at my Twitter on Saturday afternoon, I'll
what
own
was that, Ben? Oh my
Hey
gosh.
man, I was feeling froggy. I was looking at the wins that Kansas State had, which were quality. I don't want to take anything away from them, but only scoring under 50 points against Nebraska, albeit on the road against a team that does play really good defense. I was looking at certain games where they just didn't quite figure out a way to score, and I was hoping that would really kind of play into the hands of our defense really well. But hey, I mean, and I know we're going to get into the game in a second, but I'll say that what caused me to be so terribly wrong was just underestimating a little bit about just how solid their team defense was. And it just kind of shut down our offense. So again, I don't know if I'm the best source for predicting wins or losses, but like kind of going game by game down the schedule, I haven't like totally done that. But I think the kind of 4 obvious opportunities for wins, I would say, would be the 2 games, in particular, the game at home against West Virginia coming up on January 23rd. I think that's a big opportunity there right now. The worst record in the conference overall. So I think that's a opportunity for us to finally, if we don't surprise somebody prior to that against the 4 ranked teams that we are about to play, two of those in the top 5 in the country, top 3 in the country, actually.
We do have the number. We have the number 2 most difficult schedule in the entire country.
Isn't that just wild? Because I mean, we go through so many years of being used to it, especially on the football side, of everybody criticizing our schedule. Basketball is what it is. We usually have like a pretty tough schedule and out of conference, and we've been in a pretty good conference over the last decade or so. But to have did you say the number 2 ranked toughest schedule? I mean,
I did.
To
number
have
2.
that is just wild, man. Like it's just nuts. So, I mean, it's not just having a tough schedule, but like how front loaded this schedule is, where we just went on the road for our first conference game ever. Kansas State, extremely tough place to play with the reigning national coach of the year, against a team like that. And then we get a little stretch at home. But it's against Kansas, our biggest home game ever.
I mean, Ben, is that an FU from the conference? Because, they got to take care of Houston, and I imagine they're probably taking care of Cincinnati. BYU, they got to take care of because BYU's ranked, Houston's ranked. So you've got us in Cincinnati, and we are definitely not the more established brand. So is that hey, we know you guys are going to suck, so we're just going to give you the hardest schedule so that maybe our guys have a better chance of making the tournament and making some noise?
I mean, maybe I might kind of agree with that when it comes to Houston, because that's like I said, kind of a premier program coming into the conference, and maybe they're treating that. But I'm not sure if I really agree with that when it comes to BYU. And BYU's been a every other year, pretty consistent tournament team. So I don't want to take anything away from them, but I mean, I don't know if they necessarily gave them, they gave them to us like right out of the gate like that to kind of prove a point. But it's just the way it shook out. I mean, you would expect Kansas to be there. You would expect Houston to certainly be there, but to get all 4 of those teams, Kansas, BYU, Texas, Houston, all ranked, 2 at home, 2 on the road, after we just went on the road in our home opener at Kansas State in a really tough environment. That's a really tough start to this conference. I would say of those 4 games, as long as we don't get like just whitewashed on Wednesday night, against Kansas, I would say what's the most winnable of those 4 games? I'd probably would say BYU. And that's only because they kind of rely a little bit more than those other teams on outscoring their opponents. They're a very high-powered offensive team. And can we, maybe surprise them if we can throw off their rhythm in our half court defense? Even that is it's tough for me to predict that that's going to be a win out of those 4 teams. And I mainly say that because, BYU, their backcourt is like something special. They have got guards that I think it's 3 of the top 4 players in the conference in assist to turnover ratio are in BYU's backcourt. So they take care of the ball. They play together. They don't turn the ball over. And so maybe if we can impose our will from a defensive standpoint, I don't want to sound like I'm grasping at straws here, but if we can impose our will from a defensive standpoint, throw them off, cause a few turnovers, that's something that they're not like. That's not their game, right? They take care of the ball really well, and they score at a high clip. So we can slow the game down for them a little bit.
You mean they're
Maybe
a good
that's something.
team?
Yeah, they're a very high quality team, especially from an offensive standpoint. I mean, they're a really high quality team, and so those 4 games are going to be tough. But then you look at the 4 games after that, which also include 2 ranked. But we got West Virginia at home, winnable game. Record-wise, they're the lowest in the conference at 5-9. They've had a pretty tough schedule, but then we got Cincinnati on the road, and then we have a home stretch with Baylor and Oklahoma, both ranked. Number 14 Baylor, number 9 Oklahoma. Again, those 2 teams actually are kind of in the mid to lower half of the conference when it comes to team defense, and they're mid to upper half team offense. And so are they trying to rely on outscoring folks, and our defense can kind of pick up the intensity? Maybe we could steal one of those 2 ranked games. But again, it's a matter of what is our team demeanor when we go through the gauntlet of the 4 teams that we're going to face, right? Like if we're not competitive in either of those 4 games, like where is our team at mentally when we face West Virginia at home? And I'm a little worried about that. But I'm a little worried about that because of what I just saw this past Saturday night at Kansas State. But it can happen in this conference. Anything can happen with the way this team plays. So, we'll see.
Let's be real. They couldn't buy a bucket at Kansas.
It was just a weird game, man. It was just rough. Five free throws. 5 free throw attempts to their 23.
I know. We've got some stats on this one that are odd. But I'll say this. I'll say this too. Ben, I'd love your take on this. For those that don't know, Ben was a analyst for ESPN and called a lot of games for UCF. Or not analyst, on air personality for ESPN on certain games, and obviously played, so he knows this. What do you see is the big difference in the Big 12, not just from the quality of the players, but also like the style of play? What are we going to see from these teams that we didn't see in the American?
It's I don't want to sound kind of like a broken record or too cliche. It's just that it's the I think it's the consistent play, like the consistent high level of basketball that you're going to get with each team. It's almost like you can't rely on like catching them on an off night. Basically, you have to really go out there and slug it out with these teams. You think you can be like more physical with some of the big men that we have, and then you're playing a team like Kansas that has Hunter Dickinson in the middle, right? Like it's just it's teams that can beat you in multiple ways because they just play solid basketball in this conference. I mean, it's just I don't really know what else to say except it's just a gauntlet. It's one thing to try to like prepare for a team and really focus your energy on beating one particular, high level team that you have, and then you may not see a team like that in 2 or 3 weeks in other conferences, but in this conference, I mean, it's like it's back to back and it just keeps coming. So as far as style of play goes, I mean, it's not necessarily, as far as I know, or as far as what I've seen, it's not necessarily like a football analogy that you can make, like, hey, the Big 12 is a big high scoring offense type conference. I mean, it's just, I don't know what else to say, but it's just, to these teams that have played the game, they all have their little signature on it. We know what to expect from Houston, right? Like, their offensive rebounding is just going to be off the charts. They're going to be tenacious. They're going to out athlete you because they're going to play harder than you do for 40 minutes and 40 minutes plus if you need that. And they're fine with playing you in the parking lot after the game if you need to. I mean, they're just a relentless style of basketball, and it's the reason why that they're ranked so high over the past decade. But so we know what we're going to get with a team like Houston, but I mean, you just get really solid athletes around the board when you play a team like Baylor that has a few guys that can just jump out of the gym, has high level guards. It's just a gauntlet, and I hate to kind of overuse some of these words, but it's just night in and night out.
Stop giving us your coach speak. Come on. So
just got to go 1-0 every game.
Yeah, exactly. 1-0, right? Yeah, or 0-1. But like reality, is reality is that we knew what we were getting ourselves into in the conference, right? Especially for this year. Although next year it could be argued that it'll be even more difficult with Texas and Oklahoma leaving. Oklahoma had a fairly good program, but was never like, consistent tournament team type, Sweet 16 type teams. However, next year we bring in teams like Arizona and Arizona State. Colorado, not really known for basketball, but Utah's had pretty good teams lately too. So, it's not getting any easier. And they are also looking at bringing in, we're still flirting with Villanova and some of these other teams. As I think Brett Yormark's strategy is, hey, we can monetize basketball too, and this is a way we can differentiate ourselves and be a reason, because it's such a big driver of revenue for the NCAA. This is a strength that we can lean on to make sure that we stay somewhat competitive and above the ACC and the Pac, non-existent Pac-12, Pac-2 now, Tupac.
Right.
The Tupac conference. It's not going to get easier. So, for this season, what can UCF do? And better question, what should be considered a win by UCF fans from a record perspective?
Yeah, so I don't think that I've seen anything about this team that really wants or really makes me kind of get off this over-under that we've been talking about all season of 4 wins in the conference. I think there's some gettable games from teams that, from a on-paper standpoint, we actually match up pretty well with. And then you got to try to surprise a Baylor or an Oklahoma or maybe even a BYU. Like, you got to try to surprise a few to get beyond that. But I think when you're looking at teams like West Virginia, maybe Oklahoma State, Texas Tech, Cincinnati, I mean, these are the teams that I think that we measure up with. While, I mean, teams like Texas Tech certainly has high level pedigree and I mean, they were Did they win the national championship? No, they didn't win it, but they were in the national championship game, I think, about 5 years ago, 6 years ago. I mean, even these teams that you don't really think about too much if you're concentrating on, a different sport, you're like, wow. I mean, even that team, was in the Final Four recently.
Well, I mean, K-State was an Elite Eight team last year. Nobody expected it, but they were an Elite Eight team last year.
Exactly, and so they were a shot away from being a Final Four team. I mean, that FAU team had just like that magical run, and I mean, they were right there. So yeah, I mean, there's teams that I think we measure up with in that, you could circle on the schedule as being, a higher probability of a win versus some others. But I think of those ranked teams in our conference, of which there are many, looking at Oklahoma, BYU, and Baylor, I'd say those are the three teams that I think of the ranked teams in our conference. We probably could surprise one of them, but again, I don't see anything looking at the schedule that kind of knocks me off that kind of over under of 4 wins. I think if we only get 1 win in the conference, or God forbid worse than that, I think it's a disaster of a season, and it's one that I don't think Dawkins survives. But if we can get around that 4-win mark, be competitive in others, maybe not get the win. I don't want to talk about moral victories, but still show some competitiveness. I think 4 wins the mark, and anything above that, I think we should be happy with this first season in the toughest conference in college basketball.
So I wanted to go back to something that Roger was talking about earlier, and maybe with your experience, you can maybe judge this. So, of course, we have 4 new teams in the conference, and we talked about our schedule, which was away at Kansas State and this gauntlet, using the word the 50th time. This is Houston's, and we all know Houston is a very, very, very good basketball program, if not the top. Well, I think they're ranked like 3 right now. This is what the conference gave Houston as their first 5 games in this conference. West Virginia, and I don't know if they knew Huggins was there or not, but West Virginia, Iowa State, good, very solid basketball team, TCU, Texas Tech, and us. Do you really think that there's any – there had to be some kind of forethought to say, maybe we'll let Houston ease their way in? Versus like even giving us Oklahoma State at the beginning of the season, which we did beat last year. All we get them is away right now. So do you actually think there's any thought, like do these conferences actually think about these things to that level, or are we just fans?
I mean, imagine they do. I mean, it's a business, right? I mean, I imagine they do think about that at a certain level. I don't know how algorithmic our schedule making is. I mean, it has to be kind of probably starts with some sort of computer algorithm that's kind of spits it out. I know that, I mean, it's a totally different situation, but I know that when I worked for the Magic, I know the NBA schedule was made that way, at least back then. They essentially have a computer system that spits out the schedule, and then they go to each of the venues and make sure that they don't have certain things at those dates and blah blah blah. But it's totally different in this situation. I would imagine they may start with some sort of baseline, and who knows. I mean, what you just mentioned there, the West Virginia, Iowa State, TCU, Texas Tech, and then us. I mean, 3 of those 5 games are at home too, and it's against probably the lesser of those five teams. I mean, the two tougher ones are on the road for them. So I mean, I guess you can kind of say something about that. But I mean, I don't know. I mean, it's you can be critical of it, but at the end of the day, I mean, Houston could complain about their schedule being too backloaded, right? Like, I mean, you kind of don't know exactly who the top teams, the really, really tough teams are going to be. So I mean, I don't know if I necessarily would put too much stock in that, but it could be a possibility. I would say it's probably a possibility, maybe on a smaller scale, like they swapped one game for here and there to make it a little bit easier. But I mean, at the end of the day, they're going to have to go through the same type of tough schedule. I do agree with you though, Josh, that I would have liked to seen Oklahoma State twice this year. That's one of those teams that certainly I would have loved to play twice in this conference in that schedule.
One last question for me.
I couldn't tell if I was muted or not. And yet you're just going to town. For those of you,
a YouTube exclusive
we're
of me talking when I'm muted. So just so you know, when we're recording the software, you get a nice little thing right at the top that says Mike is muted, and I'm like, oh, there you go. So one quick. One quick thing. So Mark Daniels today, the day we were recording, talked about the vocal minority, the group of people talking on X, formerly known as Twitter, about one game in Johnny Dawkins, wonderful guy, great coach, needs to go. And I think he has about 1 year left on his contract after this year. What do you really think there's any way possible that we can find enough wins this year, or something changes at this point to make that trend a little different, at least in the eyes of the fans? And we have our own predictions, if we talked about that here, but is what possibly could happen with this team that's possible, like even minutely possible, that would change that flood of thought?
I think we have to beat we have to, in order for that wave to slow down, because I mean I remember after 2017 when we had this great run in football, 2017, 2018, right? Like our fans, rightfully so, because of football, were like so ingrained on like winning every game that like I just remember like Roger and I remember like on the Nightline, like I had to condition everybody this week, like basketball isn't football, guys. You're not going to win every single one.
But then you turn around and say, I'm going to make my bold prediction in case I'm going to temper expectations, but at the same time, we're going to win, baby.
It would have been awesome if I was right, but I was so wrong. But no, I think that more than one win, John. And this sounds like crazy to say, right? But more than one win against a brand team is going to. That's what it's going to take to even slow down that, if you want to call them a minority or not, but those vocal fans on X and all throughout social media, but certainly on X. Like if you want to slow down that wave, then you're going to have to beat a Kansas. You're going to have to beat a Texas. Houston would be great. I mean, that would be one that I think that would slow down that kind of talk, just because of how good they've been and how familiar we are with them. But you're going to have to beat a name brand. And I say a name brand because if that portion of the fan base very vocal, like I don't know if that talk slows down if we beat BYU. They might be a top 15 team in the country or whatever they are right now. I think they're ranked 18th. Yeah. They're a top 20 team, right? Like if we beat them, that's a big deal. It should be a big deal, but it's not going to slow down that portion of the fan base if the other losses happen, right? Like, because even if we're competitive and we lose a lot of different games, like it's just going to be like Dawkins isn't the one to bring us over the edge, which might be rightfully so if we lose all of those games. I think it's got to be multiple wins against name brands.
Let me temper that a little bit. A couple things. One, the vast majority of our conference games are quad one games. We may have had in the
I know,
AAC,
how awesome is that?
Oh, I know. In the AAC, we may have had two in a season, right? And those were out of conference. We're going to consistently have quad one opportunities from here on out, unless we leave the Big 12 and go to the SEC or something, right? We're going to have all of those opportunities. I feel like the fan base has been conditioned that we're going to lose a lot this season. What they have not been conditioned to is teams that we should be competitive with, whether it be Vegas, whether it be ESPN, whether it be us, whether it be, any other people that are talking about this game, that we just fall flat on our face. And I feel like, it's the idea of mediocrity. I mean, and it's not just this season. I mean, there was previous seasons, 5 straight losses, 5-game losing streak, all of these other things that were going on that, we've got this roller coaster always where it's like, all right, we're going up the hill, we're going up the hill, we're going up the hill. And instead of continuing to go up the hill, we go backwards. Right. And I think that constant push-pull is kind of made the fan base feel that way. And then when you look at it from a program perspective, if we're going to be, and we all know that basketball is not the focus of the athletics program right now, if we're going to be competitive in basketball and for people to show up consistently, right? This is not Kansas that's been doing this for 50 years and they're going to show up, or Nebraska that's, sold out their stadium, their football stadium, come heck or high water. This is UCF. He is going to have to consider what the fans are going to say about this program. He's just going to have to. As the AD, you can't completely ignore that. And I'll say this.
No, you can't.
It's happened for a period of time. What UCF fans, and I don't know if I'm speaking for the vast majority of you, but I'm going to go out on a limb and say UCF fans are tired of being mediocre, and UCF fans will not accept being slaughtered. Beaten, yes.
100%.
Competitive, yes. Slaughtered this season, no. So if Johnny Dawkins, consistently, and we talked about that in our text talk, if this is the consistent experience that the fans will get, UCF fans will not accept it. You can say that's right or wrong, but it'll be a fever pitch.
At that point, you're right. There's 2 ways at high level coaching in any sport, but especially basketball. There's 2 ways to get fired as a high level coach. One is you get worked every night, just like we did at Kansas State, and the fan base, and more importantly, the people who make those decisions just don't see that changing without this coaching staff. The second way to get fired as a high-level coach, especially a high-level basketball coach, is that you have multiple seasons where you're right on the cusp of being good, and you don't quite get over that hump. That's why Johnny Dawkins got essentially let go at Stanford, because he had 3 straight NIT appearances. He won, I think, all of those, or won a couple of them, but he had 3 straight NIT appearances, and they felt like they needed something better than that, and that led to him being let go. And I'm appreciative of his time here, and we've talked about Johnny Dawkins at length. But if we see, but yeah, those 2 things, right? And both of those things kind of boil down to the same future, right? They see like a lower ceiling than possibly we could be with somebody else. And he's been here 8 years, and I'm not willing to say that before I'm not willing to say it after like one horrible game at Kansas State, like that this is going to be the norm. But if this is the norm, then nobody survives that. I don't care who you are. I don't care what type of attention you pay to a certain program, or how nice of a guy you are, or whatever. They're going to find somebody else to lead this program, because that's not acceptable.
I think there's 2 key points you made there. 1, 8 years to right the ship. And number 2, when we did win, it wasn't with Johnny's air quotes.
I hate
player.
that though. That's a bunch of BS because it's not true. It's not true. He had Taco and BJ, yes, but the 3 of the 5 starters were his guys.
Or
I don't want to hear that. Terrell Allen, Colin Smith, and who am I missing? Aubrey Dawkins. Like 3 of the 5 starters. So 3 of the other guys were Donnie Jones guys, but what did they do under Donnie Jones?
Yeah.
Taco and Chad Brown were the 3 major Donnie Jones guys on that team. But what did they do for Donnie Jones? What did Matt Williams do for Donnie Jones when he exploded under Johnny Dawkins? Like that whole thing about saying that they're somebody else's guys is a bunch of garbage. I'm sorry. Because I mean what are we supposed to say? Scott Frost didn't earn the national championship because the leader on that, one of the leaders on defense wasn't recruited by him. Come on now. Like, I mean, or not one of the leaders on defense, like a lot of the leaders on defense, including some players on offense that were huge contributors, were George O'Leary guys. And so like, I just think it's that's such a convenient.
You mean like Trey Neal?
Well, yeah, Trey's one of them for sure. Trey and multiple others. Like I'm just saying, it's like we give coaches credit so much when we want to, and then when things go wrong, well, he did it with somebody else's guys.
Well, no, we give them credit. We give them credit when they win. When they lose, they don't get the credit. Now, the other part about it is, and I'll say this about that too, you mentioned Frost in football. Frost also recruited a lot of his own guys on the offensive side of the ball. Now, I'll say that George O'Leary's defense, a large portion of that was there, but even there, we had some defensive players that came on. I mean, you think about Shaquille, you think about.
Well, my point about the 3 of the 5 starters still stands on the team that won its first NCAA tournament game in UCF's history. We had 3 main guys in our rotation that were Donnie Jones guys, and 3 main guys that were Johnny Dawkins guys. So, like, who's the better? I think it's just a tired argument, and we'll agree to disagree on that because I just don't. I'm
playing devil's advocate right now and stirring the pot because you are like hot. If you guys are watching this on YouTube, and this is another reason to watch it on YouTube. Ben's cheeks are bright red right now. I'm loving.
My room because I'm getting warm.
I'm just pot stirring and watching him work.
Let's take it all the way back to this year. We kind of talked about this lightly. The Stetson game was a problem. I was there. That was a problem. That should have never happened. A. B. After that, we're like, let's right. And that does happen. But it probably shouldn't happen when you beat someone last like 19 or 20 times. We talked about Ole Miss and that being a litmus test of how this season might go. And that was a pretty tight game was there too. That was pretty good. And they've literally lost 1 game all year, and that's to number 5 Tennessee. So at that point, we get a couple wins here and there, and then we just get kind of walloped on the road. If you take a step back, we're still 9-4. We don't expect to win that many more. Any reasonable fan isn't expecting to win another 8 or 10 games. But it's not so horrible. I think it's because of how we lost. We didn't lose like that to Ole Miss. We didn't lose like that to Stetson.
100%.
Even at Miami, there was some back and forth and some fight. And this, to me, this game at Kansas State was more of a like get smacked in the face real hard to start. Missed the, was it 14-3? It was down by 10 quick. Couldn't get over the hump, pushing a little bit at the end. We'll bring it back to the text talk. We were talking about it, need to cut it down to 8 or something, and just kind of ballooned up and then ballooned again. So I don't think we have this conversation. Even if we lose by 17, but we saw maybe something different. So that's why I definitely agree with Ben's let's see what we get in the next 3 or 4 games. If we're being beat by 30 or 40 every night, I don't care if it's top 25 teams. It's going to be a problem. I'm
not gonna ever be the guy that roots for a coach to be fired. But if we get whitewashed in these next 5-6 games and we're 0-6 and we just don't look good every night, I'm gonna stand in front of the bus that's about to roll over our coaching staff. I don't think so. That being said, I haven't seen outside of Saturday, which is rough. But statistically, we had a lot of weird things happen in that game.
We keep going back to the game, but I want to make sure that we're looking at it overall, right? Because the other thing is, and let's, as much as you hear people clamor, right, and myself included, I've said all along I didn't think Johnny Dawkins was going to be successful in the Big 12, and I still don't think that. He's not the guy to elevate us to that next level consistently. Yeah. It's just not going to happen, I don't think. Now, we've got a 5-star waiting in the wings that he's bringing in for next year, but again, I don't see that consistency in that being the guy. Question is, if it does turn out that we're getting shellacked game in and game out, does our AD A have the stones and B have the money to fire him?
Now, I don't know much about the money side, but he definitely has the stones to fire. I think that if
what makes you say that?
That he would have the courage to fire him?
Correct.
Yeah, I mean, what makes me say that is for the same reasons that we've been talking about, in the sense that if we win one game in this conference, the future that he agreed, basically if Timo agrees with you, Roger, in the sense that if Timo looks at the course of this season as a whole at the end of it, and he says the money's going to start to kick in, with the Big 12 contracts and things like that, we're going to be able to, go get somebody. But most importantly, I don't feel like this is a coaching staff that can get us to a mid to upper level Big 12 team in the next 3 years. We're going to still be in the same spot 3 years from now. I just don't see how Terry Mahajer doesn't pull the trigger now. And so I think he definitely has the courage to do that. If this season goes the way that we think it's going to go, or the way that it could go, I should say. If it's a disaster of a season, 1 win, God forbid 0 wins, we're talking that then we're going that direction without even thought of it. I think what's going to be interesting, though, and I think that's what you're kind of getting to a little bit, which makes the conversation more interesting, is if we get 4 wins, but the outside of that, we don't look like that we're competitive, we just happen to get 4 wins. It'll be interesting to see if he decides to go ahead and pull the trigger. I still wouldn't be surprised if that were to happen, if the losses don't look like we could progress to wins next year, right? Or the year after that, or just continual growth. If the growth doesn't seem to be there. And I'll say about guys that he could bring in, he's proven that he can bring in transfers. There's no doubt about that. He's proven that he can bring in high level, high school talent. I mean, we just had a lottery pick that was a one and done, our first one and done ever. But what also happened with Hendricks is, with Taylor Hendricks, is that I said this on previous shows that we've been on together. I didn't really feel like he was consistently used as well as he could, and his talent was showcased enough to help him be a lottery pick, which is fantastic for the program. It's obviously fantastic for him and his family. And it's a great thing to point to for this coaching staff that we had a guy like that on our team. But I think that it also can be, if I'm really trying to be objective and almost hard as I can be on it, I think the fact that we weren't as successful as we possibly could have been with a guy like that on our squad, when in basketball one guy can really make that big of a difference, may also lead to a not as bright future.
All right, so let's wrap this up with season predictions. So I'm going to go around the horn here, and everybody give your season predictions. So Ben, since you are center stage, what do you think UCF's record will be, or how many wins will UCF get in conference?
In conference, I am going to say that we are going to get 5 wins in conference. Is
that enough for an NIT bid?
That would put us at what? That would put us at 15. That would put us at 500, wouldn't it? Maybe depending on which wins they are. It probably would be.
Let me put it to you. Let me put it to you this as a reminder to everyone. The NIT rules have changed. So it's the top rated team gets an auto bid to the NIT that doesn't make the tournament in the conference. So you actually have 2 shots to do that, right? 2 shots. That was a basketball reference.
That was a very, very bad announcement.
Hey, listen, I'm entitled to at least one dad joke per episode. I don't want to hear it. So, and I should be 2 because I have 2 kids. But, the rules have changed. So I think with 15 wins, considering how many ranked teams and how many tournament teams we're expecting to have, we may just stumble our way with 5 wins into an NIT bid. I'm being completely serious about that. That's no joke.
Yeah. And that would be, 4 or 5 wins, it makes the conversation about the coaching staff that much more interesting, depending on where those wins come from. But I'm going to say 5. I'm going to be optimistic.
All right. Another hot take from Ben, who's hot this evening. So, Trey
you got me
Neal,
fired up with that one.
We know you're a huge basketball fan, and you follow everything. What are your thoughts on the number of wins in conference for UCF? And you can't take Ben's 5.
Yeah, so I just looked at the schedule, and man, there's a lot of teams with numbers next to their name.
Did he just say a lot of L's? Is that what I just heard?
There's a lot of teams that we play with numbers next to their name. So I don't know how good that bodes for us. I'm gonna again. I don't necessarily know the most, but we play what 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 ranked teams, and that's out of what? How many games do they play in conference?
18.
How many? We play 18. We play 18.
8 out of 18, and then I know you guys talking about Texas Tech. I'm gonna say 3. I'm gonna just be safe and say 3.
But you got to remember, they play a lot of those teams. They'll play twice, home and away.
Each other. Yeah, I saw Houston.
So really, it's not 8. Let's call it 14 teams that are going to be ranked teams, assuming 2 of them we don't get the home or the away again. So think about that. Out of our conference, we will play probably 16 teams that are ranked out of the 18 games that we play.
Yeah.
That is
with all the things.
What a great opportunity it is. What a great opportunity.
I agree.
It is.
Oh, it is. I mean, if we stumble, or if we're hoping that at least 4 teams have off nights. Let's just put it that way. Because that gives us enough quad 1. That gives us enough quad 1 wins. I mean, 5 is literally a bubble team. I think the Big 12 last year had a team with like 6 wins or 5 wins go and went into the tournament. They were a tournament team. Now, where
think
we
they had
missed.
8 wins in conference, but yeah, I think that was the lowest that made the tournament last year was 8 wins in conference, but it might have been
Well,
7.
then maybe it was the
certainly a low number.
Yeah. And so the other part about it, Trey, and what you're pointing out with all those numbers is they're not high digit numbers, they're low digit numbers. So not only are they ranked, but they're ranked in the top 10 to 15, all of those teams. So, we're not playing borderline teams here. We're playing the top creme de la creme of college basketball every single night, which is great. And I love it. And hopefully, what do they say, that a rising water lifts all boats or something like that, right? Hopefully that yeah, there you go. Rising tide, whatever. It was too close to roll tide, so I avoid that. But anyway, I got to go to the teeth of the roll tide tomorrow. I got to pass through. I got to be in Auburn, and then I'll pass through Tuscaloosa at some point too. So,
sorry.
That's all right. Sorry is right. So anyway, no offense to the 7 UCF fans in the state of Alabama, but in no way at any point is this going to be an easy road. It is an opportunity, but we have to take advantage of it, and that means dumping some money into the basketball program and the facilities, and in my opinion, changing head coaches. We've got to build some energy around this program to attract donors. If we keep doing more of the same, nothing will change.
Yeah, so, that's the difficulty if we're around, even in the mark that I just mentioned, 5 wins. I think even you're still thinking about it if you're Terry Mohajir, because you're trying to build some buzz around a program that needs funding.
I mean, if Dawkins had consistently taken us to the tournament, because remember, in the AAC, you pretty much have to win to get to the tournament. It's 1 to 2 bid league, right? And we had Cincinnati that had some good years there, and consistently good years when Cronin was there, and then he left, and oh my gosh, the program fell apart, right? Mm-hmm. Then you had Houston, right? And look what Kelvin Sampson did for Houston, right? Then
and Memphis
so those are
gone
2
up and down.
Yeah, but those are 2 examples of how much of a difference a coach can make, right, for those programs. And then, then you think about, oh my gosh, I had a point I was going to make, and that sidebar just completely threw me off. Yeah, I'm running on 3.5 hours of sleep. But at the end of the day, then you have other programs where, like SMU, where their program goes through the roof, and it wasn't necessarily a big name coach. They had a good coach, but it wasn't necessarily a big name coach. It was the amount of money that they put into the players and getting the Jordan brand. So there are multiple paths to get where we need to be. If we stay on the same track, we're never going to get to the station. That's just my opinion on it. And unfortunately, that station is Johnny Dawkins.
You're right, and it's unfortunate because I think he's a great person. Like, I've met him multiple times, especially when we're 8 years ago when he was onboarding with the team, and it's not an indictment of the person, but maybe it's actually an indictment of how much funding we're putting into basketball and have over the last 20 years. Like, kind of going back to Ben's time, I don't even think Kirk could have done all of this as well even with the money we have now versus him walking over to Greek Row.
In Ben's time, we didn't have any poo. We didn't have any Pooba, whatever his name is, right? We didn't have any poos because Ben's time they were doing their own laundry, so all of them were,
we had 2 managers. All right, Jimmy Skiles was one of my managers.
Jimmy Skiles, the great Jimmy Skiles.
He's awesome.
Shout out to Jimmy Skiles. Shout out to Chris Hancock. We had some great managers back in the day that certainly did that stuff for us. But you're right. I mean, I still think about it when I walk into the arena, which I still call the new arena. Is like, this used to be a pond that I would walk around.
Dude, I've got pictures going into the Blink 182 concert that was there in '99, where it was still a reflecting pond, and you had the 2 staircases going around.
There has to be pictures floating around of us tailgating before the Troy State game at the front of the old stadium, because the Rowdy Knights, and it was raining. The Rowdy Knights had a couple of tents and stuff, and we were tailgating because that was like Troy was like, I don't know if they were top 25, but I think they were like 14-1 or something at the time. And we actually
it was the biggest game that season, is that Troy State game. Yeah.
All right, so let's Josh, why don't you go ahead and roll into your prediction since you've taken center stage with the why knowledge.
I gotta pull time while I can. Look, I want to believe. I just need a little alien head over on me. I want to believe, but I have to see what my eyes have seen, and it's not good. I want to say 4 wins. How about this? I will say 4 wins, and that will cross my fingers. That's about the best you can get from me. I want to believe. And the players are we have good players. We have good there's just some. I would say 4 wins, fingers crossed. And if we put maybe another $4 to $6 million into this program a year between coaching staffs and chartering every single flight and NIL, it would be more than 4. But we just came in. We came into a gauntlet of a conference. That's the facts. And
at the end of the day, it's a team that would do really well in the AAC. We're Memphis level now, I think, on a lot of ways. This team is Memphis level, but we're not Kansas level. So,
but look, nobody is. There's only about 5 teams that could claim that.
Yeah.
But
they just got beat, didn't they?
Well, the expectation. No, did they just get beat?
Yeah, I think they got beat by TCU.
No, they
came back.
Tough, but I don't think they beat them. Yeah, they scared the crap out of them. That's for sure.
I think.
All right, so Josh, what's the number? How many?
4. BYU got
4.
Alan, how many?
I'm gonna go with 3.
3. Okay.
Isn't
all right,
sad,
I'm gonna go with 4, and I'm gonna go with 4 because.
Actually surprised to hear you say that, Roger.
Well, I think there are 2 teams. I think there are 2 teams that we should beat, right? And that's West Virginia. And although OSU has been playing better this year, especially their big men, I think that we could compete. We should beat West Virginia. We can compete with OSU, and have a good chance of winning that game. And then I feel like we can catch 2 off nights or catch 2 Dawkins, Gus games where he catches his hair on fire or lack thereof, his scalp on fire, and coaches his way to 2 wins that we shouldn't win. So I feel like that's where my 4 come from. And anything above that is butter. Anything below that is expected. So that's what I'm going with. I'm going with 4. All right. So let's go ahead and pivot. Another basketball term. Let's go ahead and pivot, Ben. And guys, why don't you share your text talk that you guys grabbed that was slightly humorous? Or really demoralizing?
Humorous?
Yeah, you're gonna have to have Josh on this one. I didn't really highlight any text talk. Probably had to censor me on that one, Josh. I'm sure.
Nothing was humorous in that text talk. So Ben was talking in the first half about the team needing to get it under 10 or so to try to make an effort to tie, win, do something. And it was like about 4 or 5 minutes left in the first half. And then K-State went on a run and got it to 18. So my talk was, so you said get it to 18, right, Ben? And it was just, that was kind of like, I didn't put this in. I did. So after that, we're like, okay, we'll see what happens. If they, chat was, if they have fight and could bring it down under 10, on the 16 or the 12-minute timeout, great. If not, like 500 dots. And I think they ballooned it to 18 or 20 or 25 at that point. I'm like, we're to the end of the game. I mean, it was probably the end of the game as soon as we started, got smacked in the face and couldn't really fight too much further back from being down 11 or 12. But yeah, it's nothing funny was coming in on that chat. That's like an Oklahoma State game in football chat. That's the funny chats, not this.
All right, Alan, did you have a text talk for this week?
Yeah, honestly, it didn't have to do with the basketball. I just thought it was funny.
That's how bad the basketball was this week, guys.
Yeah, I just thought it was funny. Whoever sent this dude's name's screams transfer portal. It's Nico Amaliva.
That was me that said it.
Yeah, that
Somebody
was pretty
said that to me. I was dying laughing, man. Nico Amaliva.
That was really funny. So yeah,
That's good.
All right, Trey Neal, did you have a text talk for this week?
Yeah, I was the only one that I laughed to myself because Rob said I want to see a team run the Loyola Marymount Paul Westhead offense from the 90s again. I was
Do you have any idea what that
I
is?
had no idea what
No idea what that is.
I was like, I don't know what you guys are talking about. So I was just like, yeah, I'm gonna stay out of this one and just keep doing what I'm doing.
Right.
I did know when he said, because Roger, you were like under Huggins, it was press all game transition offense. I think you're talking about how we could win just going forward. I do remember that. I remember it was press Virginia. That's what that's one of the things I remember hearing just about it. So that's a little bit of basketball knowledge that I know. And again, like Ben, I told Ben, DHO, dribble handoff.
Dribble handoff.
Listen,
the one
listen,
basketball term he knows.
You have to research that and then the Princeton offense. You got to get one of those two. You have to understand what it is.
Yeah.
That's your
homework.
And then if you want to go NBA, the triangle offense.
I know it's not. See, I know a little bit about NBA. I don't know too much about college.
Yeah. All right. He knows what a pick and roll is if he knows NBA. So that's all
Pick and roll and ISO. That's it.
I was gonna say ISO next. I literally was gonna say ISO next. And
no one pops. Everyone rolls. No one pops.
All right. Wow. So with that, let's go ahead and transition. I mean, we've been talking a lot about hoops. We're going to get through the K-State basketball game. We've been alluding to it, this entire time. Let's go ahead and run through the game real quick, and then we'll get into some football talk after that. So for you football fans out there, you can fast forward to that talk, but we started with hoops first. So this game was, as we've all mentioned, not something that was enjoyable to watch. We were completely out of sorts. We didn't play our defense well. You could tell we scouted them with a 30% three-point, shooting percentage, which they shot, I think, 37% this game, of course, continuing the tradition of people getting hot, against our defense. And, it was interesting because, the whole game I was talking about CJ Walker, right? And how CJ Walker was actually a detriment early on. And offensively, he provided a spark later when he was used the way that what his strengths are, which is in the paint, right? We've had him out there on, I know what we're trying to do. We're trying to space the floor by pulling him out of the paint, but he is a bruiser in the paint. Yes. And so we need to have him in the paint defensively and offensively, right? And from a rebounding perspective as well. So, but just our offense, our point guard play was atrocious.
It was terrible from start to finish.
The stats for DJ were 5 points.
Well, he had 10 points, but he was.
Yeah.
But it was his turnovers that really concerned me. 5 turnovers, only 2 assists.
5 turnovers, right? 5 turnovers, 5 fouls. So he was five. He was high-fiving everybody in the wrong way, and the attitude. I want our guys to have a little bit of, a little bit of juice to them when they're out there playing hard, right? But I don't want them getting teed up multiple times a game, especially your point guard leader that way. That little chicken wing elbow he threw out there, I mean, that was a little too obvious when he's playing that way. And they just looked mad and angry and consternated. They were jawing at each other consistently, which I want you to be competitive, but it got to the point where you could see it on their faces that they weren't just being competitive. They were angry, and it was getting them out of their game as well. So offensively, we couldn't get anything done. We kept, we tried a few different things, but we really needed to be able to penetrate the paint with an extra pass and either kick out or take the shot and draw the foul. What we did instead was we passed around the 3-point line around the key and wasted 5-10 seconds every time before we tried to do something. I saw nobody cutting. Nobody. They were just standing around. And I said that in the text talk in the middle of the game, and then the announcers talked about it in the second half. Nobody's cutting to the basket. Nobody. There's no movement, no ball movement. You get no movement, you get no ball movement, you get hero ball because there's nobody to pass to and nobody to go to. And nobody's clearing out the space so that someone can drive the paint. So, this is my Roger yells at the basketball clouds segment this week because it just wasn't good enough. They didn't do anything that we said we were going to do. They didn't play defense well. When Walker was out there, you could tell he didn't know he was missing he missed 3 assignments that led to points. And that was just in the first half. And he was throwing everybody else off because he would either stay or he would, instead of going back into the paint, to come off of a trap or when he was coming up to try to stop a point guard or something, he did not go back to the paint and retain his assignment. And because of that, there's no rotation whatsoever defensively for backup for help in the paint. And that resulted in fouls and that resulted in poor defense. So, yeah, I'm yelling this week because it's one thing if we look like we knew what we were doing, but this game offensively and defensively, we didn't look like we were doing. And Johnny Dawkins should have never quoted. He had a quote. It was right before the Christmas break where he said that they drill defense and they drill defense and they drill defense and they drill defense and offense. He just says, hey, it's going to get better with time. He basically said when we screw up, and the players said this too, when we screw up on offense, he's like, don't worry about it. He doesn't drill them. He doesn't focus on offense. This team needs to focus on offense.
Yeah.
Because we've got none right now. We've been talking about it all season that it hasn't been consistent, especially in the half court. But
yeah, I would say
lost.
Yeah, I would say, and there's a lot to unpack there. I think the word that you're looking for is frustrated. When they were angry, I mean, it just looked like they were frustrated because they just didn't seem to have an answer for what was going on in the court, and it carried out into some outbursts that we saw from Darius Johnson and the like. I agree with you, and I will say, as somebody who has talked a lot of positive things about Dawkins and his staff, I just, one of the things that I would say has been the biggest issue is just offensive sets in general for this team, especially in the half court. And when we get in trouble and we face a team like Kansas State at least was on Saturday night, they weren't this way against some other teams because they're not exactly like the highest ranked defensive team in the conference, unfortunately for us. What we saw on Saturday night was they were cutting off passing lanes really well. They were flying around to the ball, and because I can't disagree with anything that you just said about the lack of ball movement, the lack of off ball movement, like cutting into the lane, getting to the open space, trying to get the ball in the paint in any way possible. Unfortunately, I think this is the type of blueprint. If you're a fan that really pays attention, and God knows the opposing coaches pay a lot more attention than even we do. It's the blueprint on how to beat UCF. Is you really smother the ball, you get into the passing lanes, and you fly around on defense. And this causes them to revert back to what you don't want to see from this team, They revert back to that hero ball, as you said, Roger. They revert back to just one-on-one. I can't quite get the ball to my teammates the way I want. All of a sudden, there's 8 seconds left on the shot clock, and I'm just going to try to break my defender down one-on-one, and I'm eventually going to take, a bad shot, a shot that's contested, a shot that is a lower percentage shot, and one that we don't make on at a high clip, because outside of Jalen Sellers, who has been off this year, outside of him, we don't have like a one-on-one like playmaker, and Jalen Sellers has been off for about 6 games now. So off hit what he's capable of. So it's almost like we don't have anybody. And that's a real problem. And what did we talk about what this team likes to do, right? Like they like to, or at least they show that they like to use their depth as a strength, and they like to press hard and pressure defense and turn the other team over and turn that into transition offense. And what did I say in the text talk numerous times? Like, doesn't matter if that's your game plan. If you can't score, you can't set up the full court press. Like, you can't set it up. Like, you don't set up a full court press off of a turnover. You just don't. So if you can't score on the offensive end, you can't score in the half court, you won't be able to set up the full court press. And because of that, because we couldn't score, especially for long stretches in the first half, we couldn't play to our strengths. We had to just be in scramble mode. And you're also right in the sense that during this game, and we talked about it last week, how like I am able to point to multiple examples of this team being just like fundamentally like stellar in their half court defense, especially the rotations that they have on the backside once the ball gets swung from one end of the court to the other, like how they move to cover for each other, to make sure that their man is covered, but also they're able to be in the right position to help. I mean, it was just a clinic on K-State's part, and we just looked lost on defense, which is something that even the Stetson game, which was just a bad look for our team, like we didn't lose that game because of those reasons. Like we lost this game in a way that we haven't seen all year from this team. Like the Stetson game, they won that game because they couldn't miss from the outside at the start of the second half. That's the reason why we lost that game. And they shot lights out from the free throw line and the 3-point line. But like we lost this game because of all the reasons that you and I just pontificated on for the last, however long. Like we lost this game because we just got outplayed on both ends of the court. And it's a real problem, and it's been a problem. Honestly, as with the entire tenure of Johnny Dawkins, and even leading into before Johnny Dawkins, where when we get really pressured in the half court on offense, we seem to be taken out of any game plan that we might have had on the offensive end, if we had one, and we just kind of give up, and we just kind of see if we can break it down one-on-one. It's like all the success that we've had this year, none of it has been because one player just broke down his opponent one-on-one and had just had a game. Like even the big-time games that Jalen Sellers have had, it wasn't because it was ISO ball. Like he had great games because we used the extra pass, and he either knocked down a shot or he pulled up in the mid-range, and he made a good play. But like the low percentage shots that we saw in this game it's just tough to watch, and it's really frustrating.
So like it's that goes back to something neither one of us mentioned, but we identified early on, which is the lack of perimeter 3-point shooting consistency, right?
Yeah.
Because you cannot space the floor if you don't have shooters that they're afraid of. So what did you see happen in this game? You saw them all clog the paint. So if you've got that happening and they're clogging the paint because they're not afraid of you shooting from the three, right? You either got a volume shoot your way out of it to keep it close and use your defense and rely on that, or, which is what should be happening, you see ball movement and player movement on the floor to create the spacing and get the ball to where it needs to be so that they don't have three defenders playing in the paint. And for the life of me, I don't understand how we couldn't do that. So what ended up working for us was when we brought in CJ Walker into the paint, and that way we had numbers, or at least even numbers, and we had guys that could bully and get to the rim. We can't do it from the perimeter. If we're not going to pass around the perimeter, just rolling here and passing it to each other in the same spot, that doesn't move those guys out of position, right? Yes, you're going to rotate, and there's times when that's a good strategy, but this is creating space because the ball can go faster than what someone can move. And if you can't pass it around the perimeter and stretch it that way through your shooting, then you've got to be able to have quick passes that allows you to find the mismatches that get you points. It's no different than football. No different, folks. If you understand football, you understand basketball too. It's just less people in a smaller space.
And I'll also say about Darius Johnson, he just I don't want to come down on him too hard, but he had 5 turnovers, and those 5, about at least 3 to maybe 4 of those turnovers happened early. Like, they happened when the game was at a critical point in the first half, and it seemed like, hey, if we just get something going on this possession, it's going to happen. And he looked so sped up. It was really unfortunate to see, because I hate to say this, but he just didn't look ready for the moment. Like, he didn't. I mean, especially in the first half, he looked sped up. I mean, I hate to keep repeating that, but that's what he looked like. I mean, he just looked like he was playing. He was like trying to play like faster than he should. He was, and he had a lot of turnovers and critical moments in the first, kind of that 10 to 15 minute stretch in the 10 to 15 minute marker stretch, like in that first half, where it looked like the game was just kind of like, this is a spot where it could kind of go over either way. I mean, going into that's about the time where we had a couple of successful plays in a row, and I made that text message that Josh referenced, like, hey, we cut it to about 8 here. Like, we're in better shape, especially starting the game off so terribly. I think it was 14-3 or whatever. But those were the moments where DJ just takes it up the court and he's like rushing, and he makes a bad pass and they steal it and they're breaking away on the other end. And all of a sudden the game just gets broken wide open again. And it was just on that part, when you have to rely on your point guard, coming through for you in those tough on the road games where you really have to make an impact, and you have like 4 or 5 critical turnovers, most of which happened in the first half. It's just
all right. So let's run through some of the stats, and some of these may surprise you. We were 22 of 65. K-State was 25 of 58. We actually got more opportunities than what K-State did, okay, offensively.
Because transition, they're mostly off steals and transition.
Right.
High percentage shots.
So you got 33, that were blocked. They had like 4 or 5 blocks, and they had 3 or 4 were off of turnovers that we were trying to score on. And then we got a couple that were blocked, and we got putbacks, which is good because that means the team's following them down on the fast break. So 33.8%. We were 5 for 21, 23% shooting from the 3-point line. You cannot do that in college basketball. They were 37.5, which again is above their average by 7.5%. Free throws. UCF 3 of 5. K-State 18 of 23. 5 versus 23. I don't think I've seen as lopsided a free throw, especially when you consider that we had 7 more shots at the basket and, they got 23 free throws. Now, some of them were off of technicals. So take what? There were 5 technicals shots out of that too. So take that off of there. So, you're still 18-5. 18-5. There's no way that a game gets called that way.
Yeah, that's the one part that I hate. I hate talking about it because it always sounds like an excuse if you're outside of a UCF fan in this moment. But it was tough to see that. Like, I mean, we've just talked about at length about how we saw a lot of disappointing things that happened on the court on Saturday night. But like, when you're trying to fight, like trying to grasp at straws to do anything to fight back, and then time and time again, you might take it to the rack and a lot of contact was made and they don't call it at all. You have a guy of ours on the floor and they're going back the other way. Similar, if not less, contact is made 10 seconds later and they're on the free throw line for 2 shots. Like, that type of stuff, what's already happening on the court is demoralizing to any college basketball, any basketball player in general. But like, you add the referees on top of that, where it's a discrepancy that I agree with you, Roger. I don't really see very often, especially in a game that was played this physical on both ends of the court. There was
the refs will typically, if it does get that out of whack, they will typically start changing their calls a little bit so it doesn't look so stark, because
especially late, right? Yeah, especially late. But you didn't see it. I mean, it's just. It was a lopsided game from a referee standpoint. I know that if a K-State fan is listening, this just sounds like an excuse, but I mean, we lost this game because of multiple reasons.
We lost this game because we didn't make shots, but and it's not that this is part of it, though. I mean, the momentum is certainly something to be said about it, and trying to fight back after you're just having such an awful game from the field, from a shooting standpoint. Like, you feel like you can't buy a bucket, and you can't even buy a free throw shot either. It's just tough. So at our shooting percentage for the season being around 70%, you're talking about 12 to 13 additional points that you gave up right there. So, yes, it's 77-52. Should it be 65 to 77, so it doesn't look as lopsided? Maybe. But the only reason I pointed out is because the disparity is so vast that I don't think I've ever seen that in another basketball game ever. Now, rebounds, we actually did fairly well. This was an offensive rebounding team known for it. The offensive rebounds, we out-rebounded them 16-13. So that was solid. Steals, 7-9. Blocks, 6-6. Now, normally 6 is a lot of blocks against K-State. Opposing teams typically do not get 6 blocks on us. Turnovers, 13-12. Points off of turnovers, 16-17. Fast break points, 4-8.
That's actually surprising, but yeah.
Yeah, it is surprising because we should have had more than that. But again, it goes back to the blocks and uncalled fouls. Because usually if you take it to the rack, if the team is playing on its heels, they're going to foul you.
And it also felt like, and maybe it was just not counted as a fast break point, but I think K-State was able to get some pretty good looks early in the shot clock, and it wasn't quite called transition offense, but it was just right on the cusp of that. Like, their first look was like a good one, and and I think that's the reason why I'm surprised that they didn't actually have more fast break points.
So this is kind of an odd stat, right? So we got 20 fouls to 12 fouls. Right. So technically, the number of shots that we just mentioned, somehow we supposedly got 20 fouls on us and they fouled us 12 times, but we only went to the line. What did we say?
5 times.
Yeah. How did that happen?
So only 3 of those fouls were shooting fouls.
Yeah, that's true. So there you go. Even worse. And then both teams had 2 technical fouls. I didn't even remember us shooting
I
fouls
remember that.
for getting teed up. I remembered us getting technical fouls, but I know that they said both on one of them that both players got one. It was the one where DJ was John with Perry, but I didn't see us shoot him. So that's that game. A lot of work to do. And unfortunately for this week, it's time to transition to football, which in spite of us not even playing in any of the games, has more good news than basketball.
Yeah, I know we're coming up. I know we're coming up on an hour and a half. I just want to say one last thing on basketball as far as the overall Big 12 is concerned. Coming up on Wednesday, we have the biggest regular season home game in program history. And that's not exaggeration. When a program like Kansas comes to UCF, there's no exaggeration when I can make that statement. Like, I can make that statement without any hesitation. And we're going to have a lot of games that are really, really big in the regular season. And I've heard a lot of fans say, well, half, if not more, are going to be filled up with the other team's fans. And I think what I'll say to that, while that even may be true when we go into Big 12 play, especially at home with some of these big name teams that have large traveling fan bases for basketball. I was at the Michigan game last year, right before they went down to the Orange Bowl. It was right before, New Year's, it was like December 28th or something. And I think that game is just a great example of like how UCF fans should not necessarily stress about the percentage of fans for the opposing Big 12 teams coming into our arena. A sellout game is a sellout game. And we make a run. That Michigan game last year basically proved to me, because I'll never forget it, one of my best moments as a fan in the arena. That Michigan game proved to me that if we go on a run, I don't care how many of the opposing team fans are in our arena, our fans are going to be louder than anybody can think of. And that's what excites.
That's because they're not 95 years old. And for me, I'll say this. We were just talking about how we drive revenue for the basketball conference, or for the basketball program. If Kansas wants to buy tickets that UCF fans are not buying, great, because that revenue is jumped right back into our program, which will make us better. So
absolutely, having we will break multiple attendance records this year. Starting with Wednesday night is going to be the biggest UCF home basketball game in the history of the program, and that's the opportunity that's in front of us. That's really exciting this year, and so. Just wanted to say that as a kind of period at the end of the sentence on the Big 12 preview going into it.
All right. So I'd call that an exclamation point as opposed to a period, but that's okay. If you want to be more demure, I totally understand. All right. So let's get into some UCF football talk. So we've been talking about the recruits. We had a great show with Brandon Hellwig last week talking about our recruiting class. We talked about recruiting needs in the transfer portal, and the portal giveth and the portal taketh away for us. Outside of a couple of players, maybe one or two, we got the better end of that deal. So UCF landed a few transfers this week. We've got a linebacker, which we needed, Josiah Pierre from Texas Tech. Former four-star cornerback Antoine Jackson from ECU, who was originally signed to Miami, got out of it, followed his girlfriend to ECU, and I don't know what their status is, but his status is at UCF. Western Kentucky O-lineman Wes Dorsey, he's a big dude, and he's a fifth-year senior. Wide receiver Goldie Lawrence, and that should be familiar to Knights fans because last year that recruitment went down to the wire last year, and Goldie ended up going to FSU. He played, I think, a few times last year, but came back home. And then linebacker Xavier Carter from UNLV, also very talented and very big. linebacker, and he's more of a defensive end buck type linebacker. So more of like what Tremont Morris Brash was. I think he's like 6'2", 240 or something like that. Be nice to have that. All of our linebackers be 6'2", 240, but I'm just saying. But I'll take what I can get. Alan, I know you went hard in the paint for this, so why don't you another basketball reference there? That's 4. Why don't you give us your thoughts on this recruiting class?
Yeah, for the transfers or the recruiting class?
The transfers.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean, I think Gus really for the last few years has done a great job, filling the gaps for the positions that we've needed most. And I think we said like maybe 2 or 3 podcasts ago, the biggest positions in need, at least in my opinion, were offensive line, wide receiver, depending on what Baker did. And now we know that he's going pro. Maybe one defensive end to replace Tremont Morris Brash, and then obviously linebacker and cornerback. And that's pretty much over the past week. Those are pretty much all the exact positions we've gotten. So I'm pretty thrilled with the guys that he's been able to get. Some of them are a little under the radar, some G5 guys, some FCS guys, but they all have some good pedigree, whether it's All-American in the FCS or All-Conference in the G5. Obviously losing Baker is tough, and there's not probably one guy that can really replace him, but someone like Goldie Lawrence came really highly recruited out of high school and obviously chose Florida State. Didn't play much last year, only played in like 1 or 2 games. Actually, they had a lot of other freshmen that played over him, but I think he's a guy with a lot of potential and obviously has 3 or 4 years of eligibility left. So I'm pretty happy with the guys we've been getting. I think the ECU cornerback we got, Antoine Jackson, was a really good pickup. He was a 4-star out of high school, was recruited essentially by every big school in the country, every Power 5, Texas, Ohio State, you name it. So I think they've done a great job. We lost Corey Thornton, went and got a 4-star guy, lost Javon Baker, got a young receiver with potential. Lost a guy like Tremont Morris Brash, got some defensive ends, and now we're finally getting some linebackers. That was a big concern because the Cincinnati guy we got, Deshaun Pace, we all thought he would be a linebacker, but then on the graphic they listed him as a safety. So now we've gotten back-to-back linebackers, which is obviously our biggest position of need. And a lot of these guys have played significant amount of reps in college football outside of maybe Goldie Lawrence and one of the offensive linemen. But overall, most of these guys have played a lot of college football at their previous stops. So I think they've done a really good job. We know we're going to miss on some of these guys, but if we can just hit on a few of these guys, I think we're filling out the roster with our biggest needs real nicely here.
Yeah, I agree with that. And, apparently so does On3. They had their transfer portal rankings, and they have us as the number 14 highest portal transfer class, 1.3 million in an NIL value. So we're increased NIL value by 1.3, which means in their minds, these people would cost 1.3 million to bring in. A 72.57 average ranking coming in and a 66.08 going out. So we are definitely upgrading according to On3 on these positions. But I think the most important thing that you said, I think we've got the DBs that we need. The question is, how many more linebackers can we get? And
1 or 2 more at least.
Well, that's how much we want, but how many can we get? That's the big question. We missed on a few. We actually had Ohio State receiver. I can't remember his name, something Scott. He was a very highly recruited or very highly touted recruit, and then went into the transfer portal. He was on campus this last Wednesday. But the more and more folks that we see when we started seeing wide receivers, you had to think Javon Baker, and Brandon kind of hinted at it last week, was probably going to go pro in spite of coming out and saying he was going to stay. So all in all, though, recruiting, whether it's the high school recruiting or the transfer recruiting, I think this is a pretty solid haul, and we upgraded. The question is it enough?
I don't think we're done yet either. I think there's still, we had some guys come on campus, like Brandon reported that publicly. There was like 3 or 4 more guys that are still either just got on campus within the last few days or they're slated to come on in the coming days. So, I mean, if you look at last year's class, transfer class, I believe we ended up with 15 or 16. So we're at 10 right now. So I wouldn't be surprised if we hear a few more names. I know there's some offensive linemen. Obviously, like you mentioned, Ohio State, I think his name is Bryson Rogers. And then you have another linebacker. I'm forgetting the school where his former school, but we still have some potential in getting some other guys.
Awesome. All right. So do we want to talk about, you're right. It was Bryson Rogers. You even had it in the show notes. And that tells you how often I read the show notes. I mean, while we're talking, right? So, yeah. So anyway, we use the show notes while we're going, but I don't specifically do it when we're talking about those points. So, Alan, you had a question in here that I think is interesting. Way too early starting lineup predictions. What do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I think we know there's obviously quite a few positions where we know 100% these guys are going to start. Like obviously QB, we know KJ is going to start. I think we probably at this point know 3 or 4 out of our starting linemen with Marshall and Caden Kittler. Adrian Medley's coming back. He probably is looking like he'll start. Then at wide receiver, Kobe Hudson, and then Townsend probably in the slot. And then obviously running back, RJ Harvey. And then you would think at tight end, we're set there too. So with Randy Pittman, then on the defensive. So, I mean, there it's kind of who starts in that third wide receiver slot. I think that's probably is the wide receiver 3 next year. I think that's probably the biggest question. And maybe who is at, I think it's left tackle or left guard where we have an opening there. And then on the defensive side of the ball, it's who's starting at linebacker. I'm assuming just by default right now, it's these transfers because there's literally no one else that's proven themselves or even really gotten that many reps in the last year. It was really just kind of Jason Johnson and Walter Yates who have both moved on. So I'm assuming it's going to be one of these transfers, but that's obviously a question mark. Then like DBs, you pretty much said we're set there. I think a cornerback, you probably have a combination of like Brandon Adams and then Antoine, who we just brought in from ECU. Safety could be Quadric Ballard again. Maybe that other safety spot would be Pace or the other Cincinnati defensive back we brought in. And then at defensive tackle, it's going to be all the same guys as last year. I don't think we lost anyone there for the most part. And then defensive end, I think that may be the other question mark. Is it Malachi Lawrence and one of the guys we brought in, the FCS transfer, I'm forgetting his name, or is it maybe someone that steps up, a younger guy that we brought in these last couple classes, like Kevon Call, Isaiah Nixon, perhaps. So
Troy Ford Jr.
So yeah, I think the defense is where we're really more questioning. On offense at this point, I think it's really just who's wide receiver 3 and maybe who's that 5th offensive lineman. But otherwise,
who did you think was wide receiver 2? Because Xavier,
I think Townsend,
yeah,
that's who I think by default. I mean, I don't know at this point who's played enough outside of Hudson and Townsend to really call anyone else a wide receiver 2.
I don't think he's tall enough to be a wide receiver 2. I don't
think he's gonna play outside. I think Allen means wide receiver 2, like
in just like the pecking order.
Oh, okay.
Second target guy. I don't think Townsend's going to play outside.
No, he's not going to play outside. But I just, as far as in the pecking order, I don't know literally anyone else that is going to get like more reps than someone like him that I could foresee right now. Could someone surprise maybe one of these freshmen? I know what's his name is expected to play a lot. Burdell Richardson is supposed to be a stud, and they're expecting him to get early playing time. But is he going to be like who fills that void left by Javon Baker? That's I think a big question mark.
It'll be interesting. I think that's actually who I was thinking was Richardson. But then, with Goldie Lawrence now coming in, and we've got some other wide receiver talents, just a question on if they're physically ready. But the way Gus was talking about Richardson, I think he's one of those guys that he feels is physically ready as soon as he gets the playbook and really, gets a good grasp on it. But for our wideouts on the outside, there isn't a whole lot of complexity to it. as far as the playbook is concerned. You're going to have one guy, that's just basically going to be screaming down the field, and then the other side is maybe cut to the inside, on his route. But that's pretty much it. The big opportunity for us is the middle of the field, and how much do we do we sprinkle in the tight end position now? Because we saw that in a few
games. They're going to start featuring. I think that's what they're going to move towards.
Yeah, I think Kylan Fox is going to be featured, and I think that will be our de facto wide receiver 3, in my opinion.
And Pittman had a good year, right? I mean, he's probably going to be a problem.
Yeah, he had a great year.
One of the names I didn't hear you say, Alan, I just want to, and it might be the nature of his position, so I understand that as far as the starting lineup goes, but I just want to make sure that he didn't transfer out, and I just didn't realize it is Nico Martinez. I mean, do we expect a big year from him next year, I imagine, on the defense? Or
Yeah, you're right. I didn't mention Martinez. He was the starting safety this year. I know he was a cornerback in high school, but he's back, and I should have mentioned him. Yeah, he'll be back.
No, I mean, I know he played that like kind of, they call it night linebacker. He kind of played that deep linebacker, whatever it may be. But so he's kind of like that tweener position, anyways. But I mean, I think he's going to have another big season to follow up. What I would consider kind of a breakout year this year.
Yeah, I agree.
And I living in a Popka, I followed him in high school, so I was.
Well, I mean, we were excited about him when we were on Nightline when we got him. We were super excited about him back then. It's just funny how our recruiting's changed, as far as the number of 4-stars, and there's even some separation there amongst the 4-stars, a high-level 4-star or borderline 4-star. You know what I mean? So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see if he finds a place. We've got some talented folks we brought in that were hurt. Henderson was one that we'll have to figure out how he fits into this puzzle. Troy Fort Jr. that I mentioned earlier, highly touted recruit, looked like he was going to be a difference maker, got injured and had to sit out most of the season. So there's some other guys on this roster that we haven't heard about that could make a name for themselves. So it's going to be interesting.
No doubt. All
right. I guess that I guess wraps that up, unlike our linebackers.
Ooh, that's harsh.
Yeah.
The linebackers this year. Next year it's going to be better, right?
Yeah, our linebackers or our defensive backs. Let's go ahead and say that too. All right. UCF NFL update. Anybody have any updates on our NFL players and how they were doing this year? Who's in the playoffs? I did see Matty Ice is back on the field. He got signed again. Was it the Chiefs or
the Panthers? So he's right back out.
Panthers. That's right. Where football players go to die now. But I'm happy for him. This was the same guy. Yeah. But he was the same guy who, went and accepted a job with Lockheed Martin after he graduated, got called up by the Pittsburgh Steelers, and he's kind of been in and out this entire time. So.
Yep. I think Gabe Davis and them are in the playoff Bills. He got hurt though. I don't know what literally last night. I don't know what they discussed with him, like what happened. I don't know if they have any updates, but he played, he got hurt, and then he was in street clothes at halftime. So
that's a big blow for the Bills for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. He is 0 for 2 targets and got no yards, but I didn't watch the game. I didn't realize it was in street clothes.
Yeah, he got hurt in the early second quarter, and went in, came out at halftime, and was in just a hoodie, and that was it. So I was like, oh gosh.
One of the guys we had mentioned is kind of like it's a sore subject, especially for guys our age, like Roger and I and others. It's just seeing Matt Prater do so well. He had his 400th and 401 NFL field goal made yesterday. for the Cardinals.
Mhm.
So
Golly.
I don't know how many, how long that list is, but that seems like a lot to me.
He might be our first Hall of Famer, in spite of having
I
folks
think
like
that there's a
Brandon
strong
Marshall.
possibility.
And I mean, he may be our first Hall of Famer, but despite having, the likes of Brandon Marshall,
And he's kind of like our Ray Finkel on the UCF side.
Here's the thing. We need let's for a future segment talk about Matt Prater at UCF for Noah and re-education, because I have some insights and from players on the team from that time when I was an instructor. Right, actually after that semester, we don't get that far in that game without him. I know.
Everybody remembers
another podcast, but that entire. I'd say the two Hawaii Bowls, the Hawaii Bowl that we were probably going to get into with Dante Culpepper and UCLA's fun stuff, and the Hawaii Bowl we actually went to. I think those two are probably good student re-education segments.
All right, awesome. All right, let's pivot.
I was going to say, just on the NFL stuff, if Jordan Akins is still in the Browns, he's still playing. Davis is still playing. Davis number 2, Kalia Davis for the 49ers is still playing.
Alex Ward.
On the Rams.
Alex Ward.
Yeah. Latavius, because he's still on the Bills. Like, we have a good amount of people. Charlie Hewitt, who's been in the NFL for as long as Noah's been alive. Like we have a lot of people that are actually in the playoffs, more than I expected.
Well, it's funny that you said Charlie Hewitt, because that just confirms to me that you don't listen to anything Alan says, because that was like his second person that he mentioned was Charlie Hewitt.
It's very soft.
But let's go ahead and do that pivot that I was just referencing. And let's talk a little college football playoff. Obviously, Michigan just won their first national championship since 1997. So congratulations to the Wolverines. I'm just glad it wasn't an SEC team, especially the one that shouldn't have been in the playoff to begin with. Let's talk about the playoff, because times are a-changing. We've got 2-year contract left. We've got a 12-team playoff coming. It seems the format has been fiddled with again to a 5+7 format for the next 2 years, which should be 4 Power 5, 4 Power 4 conferences. I got to get myself used to saying that now that the two-pot conference is down to 2, and then it should be the 1 G5 champ. So before it was going to be 6 and 6, but now with the demise of the two-pot conference, it's 5 and 7. However, going forward, dude, that was so 5 seconds ago. We're on to the playoff. Come on, bro. No, bruh. All right. That's how he got his name anyway. But going back to the playoff, there's a few things that are going on. Back when the whole Power 5 narrative started, I don't know if you guys remember this, but way back when the playoff was going and they were negotiating on all this stuff as to how the monetary distributions were going to go, the Big East was going away, and they were trying to strip the BCS/Power tag. UCF was caught up in all of that. The Power 5 narrative started at ESPN. And that narrative set the stage. There's no Power 5 in the NCAA structure, none of their legal documents. What they do say is autonomy conferences, which at the time was meant, and the way they sold it was, hey, we've got a lot of money, but we're being held back on doing good things for our student athletes because the rest of the schools that don't have as much money as us can't do that. Now, obviously, the AAC went on its whole Power 6 campaign. UCF and their conference mates, it put in place everything that the autonomy conferences put in place just so that they could, use that narrative, and obviously because they could. So it was all bunk. What it was a power grab and a money grab. We may be seeing the same thing happen. The last 6 months or so to a year, we've been hearing about the Power 2 narrative and how the Power 2 were consolidating all the brands. So because they consolidated all the brands, they should get more money because they're bringing more viewers and all of this stuff, right? How does this affect UCF? I have a sneaking sneaking suspicion this is going to rear its ugly head in the next playoff. So after these 2 years are over, how the distributions for the playoff money will end up in that 2-year time frame, because those negotiations are happening now. That Power 2 narrative is going to get stronger and stronger. The interesting part about that is the 2 Power 2 conferences, one belongs under the ESPN banner, the other belongs under the Fox banner. So how does that affect us? Because that brand valuation and building those brands up is all for, hey, we want you to watch our content so that we can sell advertising dollars. That's why you're seeing what you're seeing. So out of all of this, Fox and ESPN right now, that came out today that ESPN also has a competing bid. A couple days ago, Fox is trying to, we had pontificated, to use Ben's word from earlier, that the playoff would be split, meaning amongst the advertisers. It just gotten so
like
expensive.
the NFL does.
Right. So that they were going to split it, right? Which might be good for the sport because you have brands that are one or the other, right? They're either paid for by ESPN or Fox, or in the Big 12's case, both. So if they're split, it's great for us all the way around. Now it turns out that Fox, with the large bid, which kind of came out surprising because the dollar size of it, and ESPN, which you've heard about all their financial woes recently, laying people off, consolidating, doing all these things. They also came out with a competing bid, and they have the right to match. So ESPN may still end up with this. Now, this may be Disney has been trying to sell ESPN. And because they've been trying to sell ESPN, the biggest value that ESPN has, or that is the college football playoff. So I could see this as a play to overpay to get them an asset that they could sell. Because the only way that ESPN makes money, and it's been that way since the playoff started, was the playoff advertising revenue dollars. They are in the red until after the playoff is played, and they get paid by that. How do I know that? Because I looked at all of their financial statements, and I was on all their quarterly calls back when I worked for Disney in a leadership position. So that has rang true then, and it's only gotten more expensive now as conferences have cost more. So what does that leave UCF? And I'm interested to hear you guys, knowing all of that, knowing that we're getting ready to go into negotiations, hearing the Power 2 narrative, where does that leave UCF? And I do believe that's the foresight of Brett Yormark for 2 reasons, saying, hey, I'm going to consolidate the basketball brands to make sure I don't get left out too much on all of the other winnings, but also in case there is a split, because if they don't get their way, they will split, that the Big 12 will go. So I'm interested to hear from you guys. What do you think about this? Will there be a Power 2? Will it be, will this be the new narrative, all we hear? And, will we be able to compete and continue to stay relevant as a conference and as a school in that third best conference? Because the ACC is on its way out, guys. Once they lose FSU, it starts to crumble.
Yeah.
I think. Go ahead, Josh.
All I was gonna say is, to me, it depends if we separate football and every other sport. Because if you separate football, then maybe you have a leg to stand on that there are 2 conferences that are at the top or darn near close. And that third conference is definitely the Big 12. If you add in even men's basketball alone, and this is, we were alluded to this a couple times, it's probably part of Brett Yormark's play, not only because he has the background from basketball, but you can't exclude the Big 12 men's basketball from anything that separates itself off from the rest of collegiate sports. You can't. We just talked about it on this podcast. We have the second hardest schedule. Where Trey looked up the schedule for the first time, I think he went, "Whoa, look at the numbers of February 13." There is 0.0% chance that if men's college basketball is included, that you can preclude the Big 12 from whatever the new normal is. But if it's just football, you have a little bit of a better argument. So I really think it depends a bunch on what ends up happening with this next contract. If it's solely Fox or solely ESPN, they're going to do what they currently kind of do. Promote their own brands, build up, viewership for sponsors and dollars and all that stuff. And those who are not part of that TV station or that conglomerate, if you will, well, they're not going to be talked about as much unless you're really, really, really good. Like Michigan, who, just won the championship this year. You have to talk about that on ESPN. I don't care if all their games are pretty much on Fox. You have to, because you have to. Forget controversies and everything else. They are a darn good football team, as we've witnessed throughout the season. So that's my take on it. If it's just football, the negotiations are going to be harder and harder at that top level to say, yeah, we really need to have four conferences that deserve it. 3 might have a pretty darn good argument. And honestly, it really depends, I think, on the next couple of years too. If you start seeing Big 12 teams or even ACC teams really make a shot of it because they have they get to the playoff and all they need to do is win a game or 2, and you see that snowball rolling, then maybe there's a different conversation. But if you include basketball, it's a top 3, and that's if you football and basketball combined, it's a top 3 conferences, and I just don't see UCF being part of it.
So is it more likely that the conference gets parted out like the ACC is about to, or is it, and you do the Power 2 and you have 2 consolidated brands, or is it a situation where you keep the Power 3, right, and you need it for the content for both parties, because then UCF is, and the Big 12 is in the catbird seat because both parties have a vested interest in Big 12 content.
Yeah,
I'm with you, John. I'm with you. I think it will solely depend on if they're going to split football and basketball. Because if you're just strictly talk basketball, I know Big 12 is number 1. When I was growing up, ACC was big basketball.
It's still big
basketball. Yeah, so if you get rid of the ACC, and you're just completely abolish it, where does UNC end up? Where does Duke end up?
That's come out. I mean, the SEC and the Big Ten already have their picks. I mean, there's been multiple reports on who goes where. Virginia will be one. UNC will go. And teams like NC State are going to be on the outside looking in. So
and then I think depending on that split, is it football? Is it the whole school or is it just football? I think that's a huge decision. And I don't think it goes to 2 personally. I think never mind. I mean, because Fox and ESPN kind of run it. So
it's not a kind of. They do.
Yeah.
No, it's what they want to do.
In the perfect world, it's 3 because you get the perfect blend of everything. Big 12 might be the 3rd best football conference, but it's the best basketball conference, and then everybody else kind of evens itself out.
And
if it goes to 2, that's where it kind of gets tricky, and I think that's where it's going to be you're going to have some tough decisions. You're either going to split football and just completely go rogue, do its own thing, or there's going to be a lot of good schools kind of left out of the party. And I think they're going to have to reevaluate everybody, because I think teams like Mississippi State, they're not going to be in. If you go to 2, you can't take some of these straight like straggler brands in the SEC, some of these straggler brands in the Big Ten. I don't care how much money
there's not a mechanism for kicking them out. So it's either they're going to be the Vanderbilts of the world, that the only reason, or Vanderbilt of the world, where they're only there because they were there 100 years ago, right? So I don't see that. If it does go power to, it'll be additional brands, not subtraction, unless they completely blow it up and go independent of the NCAA, which
that's what I think. That's what I think
which has been hinted at. In which case, in which case, I think they need all of those brands to have enough content, to have enough games to justify.
If they go independent of the NCAA, they might keep a lot of these teams just for content purposes.
I mean, when the college football playoff was created, didn't they basically just like go independent of the NCAA anyways? Yes. I mean, it's not, the college football playoff is not an NCAA event.
Nope.
The only reason
the highest revenue NCAA event is the college basketball March Madness tournament, because the CFP is not an NCAA event.
Yeah, it funds everything, and I'll say this: the interesting thing will be, and the reason why it's gone this long without football separating completely, is just simply the tax shelter, because they have a tax shelter as long as they're under the NCAA. Once that goes away, that tax shelter goes away, and that's a lot of revenue that they're missing.
Yeah. Which leads you to think that ultimately, and that we've talked about this with NIL and transfer stuff, but really NIL, but like ultimately, like, and as crazy as it sounds, like U.S. Congress is going to have to get involved in this kind of stuff, which is nuts.
Interstate commerce.
Congress is already, they're already involved.
They are already involved. I'm just saying that it's even more like
it'll be more.
Congress, it's a way to make more money. Think about the tax revenue you would generate that they're missing out on, whether it be from paying players, right? So they're getting the tax revenue from that. They're getting the tax revenue from the TV contracts through the schools, right? A lot of these, most schools, especially big schools, including UCF, have their athletic programs are actually DSOs, or direct service organizations, which means they're a separate entity from the school. And so thereby, if they enter into contracts that way, there are some tax shelters being part of a public but not a private university, right? So that's why a lot of these private schools are like, yeah, we'll never participate in that. Stanford's already said that. We're not going to pay players, because guess what? That opens them up to pay a bunch of taxes that they don't have to pay right now. So at the end of the day, if they do that, then they're going to be making a lot of money. For the government's part, I'm surprised they didn't pass any legislation to just say, hey, we're going to bring it all in-house. You guys are going to get taxed. The players are going to get taxed. And that's it. Make it into a regular job. It's to the government's advantage to do that.
Now, if you're even thinking of splitting off football, right? Let's just say, yes, this is what we're going to do. You're already kind of signaling to the NCAA that they're not needed. Why wouldn't you just take the basketball schools, right? NCAA credits are a lot of money. But if you pull the Big 12, what's remaining of the ACC after they get split up, SEC, and the Big 10 out of the NCAA tournament, you're going to have a quarter of a tournament. So, I mean, if it's already cash grab it all. But I really do think that all this is going to be driven by the same thing it's been driven by since the 90s, which is TV money. And within reason, a consortium of groups, including the CFP and some presidents, and basically Fox and ESPN, unless like Amazon or Turner or NBC or a couple of other places, maybe even CBS, get their fingers into the pot. That's how college football, or even the revenue sports, are going to go, because as a very, very wonderful group, Wu-Tang once said, cash rules everything around me. And that's what it's been like for the past 20, 30
Oh
years.
my God.
Except for Trey never got a dime.
He got his keys in. No matter what, he got his keys in. So
I don't have the musical keys, but I have a fun fact though.
Trey, go ahead.
My question becomes, say they do, because I think this is where they're headed, like a minor league football or a minor league entity. What happens as far as the student part, as far as the scholarship part? Like, because I'm gonna be honest, if I'm a business person and I'm paying players like as a business to perform, I'm not really worried about what kind of grade you're making. I need you to focus on the product that I'm paying you for. You know what I'm saying? So like, where does that kind of, because we're already like at the tipping point, I think, of paying players and you're on scholarship for academic, like the academic part of it. Like we're at the tipping point. So I think there's going to be, what do we do? What's going to happen?
Certificate programs at universities for business ethics and stuff like that. I mean, truthfully, when it comes to scholarships, I mean, you're either there to go to school or are you playing school or are we playing sports? And I think we used to love the idea, which was reality, but TV money and other things just,
cash rules everything around me.
Cash rules everything around me. But sometimes you're a businessman, not a businessman, right? It's all the reality. So I really think if we become minor league football, they're really not going to be student athletes. They'll be representatives of the university, and maybe we can get them the things they need to do.
All right. Anybody else? Alan, you've been awful quiet over there. Any thoughts on this?
No, I mean, everyone pretty much said everything that most of my thoughts on it.
It's like, you guys said everything. You need to shut up and let me talk.
No. I mean, it was all good.
There's some statistics coming up, I'm sure.
No, I've said now for a couple of years that I hate the direction of college football, but it is what it is. It's I think, there's a good chance it either goes into, like mini NFL, like minor league kind of thing, like the D League for like the NBA kind of thing, or it's going to or I think we've been kind of heading towards a two super conference system, the ESPN and the Fox conference. I forgot there was a coach that said that one time, like 10 years ago. It was a big head coach. I don't think he's a coach anymore, but he said something about it being an ESPN and a Fox conference, and feels like that. Where does that leave UCF? Hopefully we get another lifeboat again. I don't know if there's two conferences and it's most of the blue bloods and best teams in the country. Everything else is going to feel like a consolation prize. So hopefully it doesn't go towards that. We'll see. I don't know. It just seems like the last 2 years, there's been a whirlwind of the college athletics changing irrevocably. And, I don't know where it goes. It just, every day it seems there's a new rule. There's now with the transfers, you can transfer anytime. And there's just something new that just keeps happening feels like every week or every month. So I don't know. Hopefully UCF still stays relevant and stays in a quote unquote power conference. We'll see that.
I do think that's where, like, when I talked about a couple of weeks, like the performance of the football team, I think it is kind of important because, again, this is the reason we're in the Big 12 now. We can credit those, those early UCF teams, the Fiesta Bowl.
Credit yourself. Go ahead.
No. Because I always give credit to that Fiesta Bowl team first because that's kind of what got that 2017 group. Like my class, that's the reason we came to UCF. A lot of guys. Like if they go 7-6, most of us probably don't go to UCF, just realistically speaking. It was a culmination of that season and the hype going into it, like, oh, this is kind of a cool school. And then we get on campus. Wow, this is kind of a really good school. Like that's what happened. So there was that 2013, then 2017, 18, and then into 19, that parlay, all of that, I think kind of led up to this. And like me and Roger, we've said this like just in our conversations, it can't stop here. Like,
no.
If you think this is the tipping point, it can't, or we won't make it to this next part, which I think we're headed.
No, then you'll end up like SMU without all the old donors, right? Which, by the way, SMU not getting P5 payouts, so they are the pony depressed.
I think if, say, for example, they go P2, they're going to take some of these teams. I think UCF's in a sweet deal. You're in like you always mention, we're in a big hub, Orlando. We essentially are going to take that Tampa area, that hub. Then you'd have, FSU up north, down, and then Florida. Like, I think those will be the 4 Florida schools, and then they start picking and choosing. Like, I think there's a chance, but we have to perform. Like, we're not going to get in going 3-9 for like doing this in the Big 12.
Let me say this to your point. If they do go to a separate program like that, I do think UCF goes in just by virtue of the metro population and the number of alumni we're pumping out now. That's what puts us in a good position more than just the football program. And versus Cal U, before they jumped us into the Big East, into the BCS, right? And they completely fumbled the football. Now we have the advantage that we are in the Power 5, so we are on the stage where we could get picked up. And those metrics matter more now because a lot of these smaller schools, I hate to say this. I mean, there's a lot of Nebraska fans out there and they show up for their football program, right? There's not a lot of Nebraska TV sets because their population is so much lower. We have 23 million people in the state of Florida, and the whole entire state of Oklahoma has less population than the Orlando metro.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of those schools, if it does go that way, it's going to be markets. It's going to be, just like professional sports, small market teams, big market teams. We're going to be one of those big market teams.
I think what would be interesting, and I this is just an ideal state and I think it was Chip Kelly that said that this year. I don't remember for sure if it was him, but one of the college football coaches talked about, like, what if we had, like, I don't remember the number that we referenced, but I'm just going to say like a top 60, right? Like and maybe for the first year or first 5 years, we choose who that top 60 is or top 80 teams. And you divided them up into 4 like regions of the country. And I'm talking about only football here. I think
it was Chip Kelly.
Yeah, it was Chip Kelly, and he talks about this, and he probably used a much lower number than I just mentioned because he doesn't give a crap about the 40 through 60 or whatever it may be. That being said, I think if you use that kind of thought process, you had geographically, like you were trying to win the Southeast, for instance, if you're a UCF and you're trying to go on to, to the next level, and then you have a national championship based on that. I think that would be rather interesting. It would be much more like pro sports. Your schedule could be based on you play at least 7 of your games or 8 of your games in your region, and you play 4 of your games outside of your region, something like that. That would be interesting. And then on top of that, you could have some sort of, for the teams that do get left out of whatever that number may be. I mean, I don't know. I mean, like the largest international sport in the world, I mean, has a relegation system like soccer does. So you could essentially take a, let's call it a, 10% or 20% or whatever it may be, whatever you decide on, and have a relegation system where you're allowed, you have whatever that lower tier is outside of that top number, have a way to play their way into that larger system every year. I think.
What do you guys? Well, I know this is a pivot off of that. I don't think relegation will ever happen here, to be honest.
No, none of that what I just described is ever going to happen. But I'm just saying that would be
something that has been brought up again, though, in light of this Power 2 and further segmentation and updates to how people are going to be segmented, is the renewed effort of an NIT. So for football. So do we think, and I want to be brief on this because we are at 2:18 and it's a great conversation. Do we think there is a legitimate chance now that all of these things have changed, the consolidation has changed, that people are more open to a NIT version of the playoff?
If there's more money, I mean, it's again. I mean, that's a. Do I think the fans are going to embrace a secondary playoff? No. Do
Are
I
they
think
going to embrace it more than the crappy bowl games?
I think they get rid of a lot of that.
Yeah.
That's what I think. I think they're going to get rid of a lot of it. The thing about basketball, at least for me, you can see guys don't sit out basketball like NIT tournament. At least not what I've seen. Maybe I'm wrong or irresponsible saying that, but the way we are, like the way we're not programmed, but the way we see it just as guys that played are, if you're not playing, not just us, but most of the people, if you're not playing for a national championship and you can declare, you're not going to jeopardize that. A lot of guys think like that now. It's really a shift.
I can say this. I can tell you this. Players don't, but teams do.
They do. I agree. And it's just, I can't, if like Ben just said, if guys aren't playing in the bowl game, then people don't even, I mean, what were we talking about when we saw we had to play?
You know who cares? ESPN, who gets the empty ad revenue for putting them out there. That's exactly who cares.
Of course. Now, I can see them doing that for that is sole reason, but I don't think the product is going to, I don't think the product is going to be any better than what they have as far as bowl
it won't. It's simply shelf space. That's why ESPN owns 29 bowl games, folks. Nobody cares about the I don't know, random carrot in the ground bowl in like Wyoming, right?
Well,
nobody cares. Nobody's watching.
TV slot.
Do you think?
Exactly.
I mean, do you think that you could possibly get more people to care though if like their team was going to play the following week if they won that game? Like, so if you think about it from that perspective, right? Like one of the largest crowds that UCF has ever had at home was an NIT quarterfinal game, right? Mm-hmm. Like, and I actually think that is the record still, but I can't. It's definitely top 5 largest crowd ever. Like, so we look at bowl games because there's like, who cares about the potato skin bowl like trophy that you win and that your team can put in that trophy case? Your season's over no matter what, right? Like at the end of that bowl game, like you're not like the end of the Gasparilla Bowl this year, like we're not watching any more UCF football until fall of 2024. So like nobody like, I mean, if win or lose that game, that's going to happen. But if it will only matter next week and you get more, like people will watch that more. I mean,
it will only matter. I think.
Go ahead.
I think it'll only matter if ESPN and Fox or whoever controls the playoff changes the narrative. I think there are more T-shirt fans out there that will root for whatever state school that's out there for their state that's in big time football than the small schools. I don't think
they're ever going to change the narrative. Then I mean, that's not happening. Like the narrative.
Well, I mean, it could if it makes their shelf space more valuable, right? So yes, it could if they switch that up. That's why I also feel like it would be better for everyone involved if the playoff contract were split, because right now you have ESPN, who is undoubtedly still the top dog in sports broadcasting. They absolutely try to spin a narrative so that the teams that they own, meaning the conferences that they own, will make the playoff. And anybody who doesn't think, whether you think it's direct involvement or whether it's just marketing / branding that they're doing, right, by not putting teams on during game day as often or whatever, if you don't think that's happening, you're blind. Okay. And that would be bad and poor marketing on their standpoint. So, at the end of the day, what it boils down to I think, for that is if the media is incentivized to go ahead and change the narrative to be more inclusive of these other team performances, then yes, I could see them. I could see an NIT matter. Otherwise, if they don't get, if they don't get airtime, if nobody's talking about them, then nobody's going to care because that's everybody's B school for the passive fan anyway. So that's my feeling on it or thought on it. So
do people care about the NIT now?
Not unless your team's like
in it.
unless your team's in it. I mean, nobody cares. No casual fan cares about the NIT right now. But almost every casual basketball fan, one of the most exciting weekends of the year is the first weekend of the tournament.
Yeah, and I mean, I'm a casual basketball fan. I don't.
Right.
There's not an NIT Madness bracket challenge. They're not going to advertise that. So, I guess what would make them advertise a NIT football tournament if they, you know what I'm saying? I guess that's what I don't understand. Why would they?
Well, the interesting thing about that question is ESPN actually does own the NIT, and they haven't owned the NCAA tournament ever. I don't know if they ever have. I think CBS owns that, and they basically always have. And so ESPN advertises their the women's NCAA basketball tournament much more than they do the men's NIT.
Gotcha.
But I think the point remains though that an NIT football tournament, in my opinion, would actually get a little bit more eyeballs on it than these bowl games, because if the bowl game because they would matter to the fan bases that like those teams. Again, if I'm going to be able to see one more week of my favorite playing college football, then I'm going to take that all day long.
I think it's more if they have an opportunity to win a championship, it doesn't matter what kind. If it's not the championship, they can win a championship as opposed to just some random bowl pairings in some spot.
That's what I mean. That's what I mean. Yeah. It's a culmination championship as opposed to that you have to work over a few weeks off of to get, as opposed to I won the
taxpayers Gator Bowl,
right? The Saltine Cracker Bowl. What are we talking about here?
Hey, I like me some saltine crackers.
Wasabi or something. I think that was actually a name for a. It wasn't.
I will say I want to go to the Pop-Tart Bowl in Orlando next year if our team gets.
I keep wanting to use that one, but it was actually pretty clever.
Josh, I hate to tell you this, only the players get to eat the Pop-Tart. So unless you want to watch some guy in a suit go into a toaster, whatever floats your boat, bro. All right, so let's move on. We've got a couple of things going that we have to talk about. One, I want to give a little bit of listener love. We had a great reaction from all the folks that were out there. We picked up some new followers. Appreciate that. I hope you continue to do that. I wanted to highlight some folks that gave us some love. So obviously Brandon was on and he made the show even more entertaining than it already did. But May Knight, thank you. He said, Roger just got done listening. Great job. Brandon was awesome as always. Tony 791314. This was really cool episode. Well done, gentlemen. Knight. Okay, I'm going to try this. Knight jumps Queen. I appreciate what you guys are doing. Yours is quickly becoming one of a couple of podcasts that I look really forward to each week. Keep up the good work. That was a particularly good episode. Lazy Sunday, great episode. Charge the duck on. To which I responded, quack, quack. And then our good buddy Rob said, great job. Enjoyed this one. So everyone who, took the time to give us a little bit of feedback, we appreciate it. Please remember to like, subscribe, comment, so we can keep the dialogue going. Give us feedback or what you want to hear about. We do this for you guys. We do it for fun. And we really appreciate that you take the time out of your day to listen to us ramble about random things. So that's it for listener love this week. And let's go ahead and get back to what our usual is with Alan and with Josh. So first up, Alan's oxymoronic stat of the week. Alan, we see your face.
Bueller.
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 We're moving on. Yeah, I think so. He's drooling on the keyboard right now. All right. So since Alan's not here for his oxymoronic stat of the week, he's here, but he's not here. Josh's sometimes funny fact of the week. Josh, take it away.
Hey, so there's an interesting amount of things going on at UCF this weekend, if you weren't aware. Most of us know we're talking about the basketball games that are coming up. Of course, Kansas coming in on Wednesday, but we also are playing against BYU on Saturday. You know what also is happening on Saturday? We're also having a women's team play another ranked game, which we'll talk about in just a little bit. But you also know what else is happening at UCF's campus at 12 o'clock at the football stadium that we haven't really talked about today. It's the Hula Bowl, the All-Star game.
That's right.
So we have 2 top 25 ranked opponents that we're playing against, and we have the Hula Bowl, which may be why I'm avoiding UCF all of on Saturday, perhaps. But here's a fun fact. The Hula Bowl is at UCF, and it's starting at the same time as all this stuff. Which former UCF Knight is a member of the Hula Bowl Hall of Fame?
No idea.
We said his name during this podcast already. Best hint I can give you.
Oh, Brandon Jennings, or not Brandon Jennings, Brandon. Wow,
Brandon
Marshall.
I was going to let you hang there. Yeah, Brandon Marshall. He's an inductee in 2023, and they started the Hall of Fame there in 2019, I believe. And I mean, the other inductees, you can. I'll just for those who are listening, you can go just do a web search for Hula Bowl Hall of Fame inductee. I'm going to put it in our notes on the side here. I mean, there are no slouches in there. Like Bobby Bowden, this year inducted was Bobby Bowden, Reggie White, Willie Rolfe, Steve Bartowski, Daryl Tolley, Ron Simmons, and Brandon Marshall. So and Marcus Allen and some others were kind of good football players were inducted to the Hall of Fame last year. So there is this is not just a small amount of people. That's a lot.
All right.
So,
thanks, Josh. I think we might need a mic check for you. That being said, let's go ahead and do a quick update on the other UCF sports. Yeah, Josh, for those of you not watching YouTube, Josh is having some technical difficulties. We apologize for any inconvenience and his horrible voice. Let's
not his voice. It's Mike or whatever it is.
Well, yeah, Mike. Sorry, meant to say Mike. You're right. I shouldn't say that. He has a great voice. I shouldn't say that. All right. So that being said, let's go ahead and get that quick update on other UCF sports. UCF women's hoops. Unfortunately, UCF drops to 0-3 in Big 12 play. They lost to OSU 68-61, so a lot closer than that Oklahoma game, etc. And then to K-State. I almost did it again. I did it last week. I said, or week before last, or I said Kent State. K-State 72-56. Next up, they have Cincinnati. The big question is, what spring sports might succeed in the Big 12? I'm going to say softball for sure. Baseball will be interesting. So I'm really excited to see, especially next year, how the baseball team looks, but have a lot of confidence in Wallace, Coach Wallace, our coach and former UCF alum, former UCF player, who is now the leader of that team.
I saw him last week. He's it was good to see him. So we went to UCF together, so we talked for a little while. He's doing some upgrades to the stadium, small things, but he's real excited about the season and a lot to do before the season starts. But I'm looking forward to baseball season. But I agree with you on softball. It's just interesting to see with the last year of Texas and Oklahoma being in the conference how they can compete with those top 2 teams along with UCF and what they bring. It'll be interesting.
Yeah, Oklahoma is going to be the tough one. I mean, that's basically the Alabama of softball. So, all right, guys, we made it to 2 hours and 33 minutes, which is slightly less than last week, in spite of having Josh Lazar back this week. And again, appreciate spending the time with you guys. We get so excited talking about this stuff that it just flows and it goes by quickly. If you did not notice, I did fix my green screen. So for all of you that were out there giving me feedback about that, I finally fixed it just for you. So thank you for the feedback. It looks great. And you know what? Go Knights and
Charge on.
Charge on in whatever voice you're going to hear from this thing. I don't even know what's going on.
it still sounds terrible, Josh.